Coming up, Tennessee needs a win versus Alabama, and they may have just gotten one via the transfer market. We'll tell you all the details next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. Good to have you with us. Hours worth of SEC talk coming your way. We'll take your comments. We'll spout off. We'll probably argue about some stuff. We'll hear from just a multitude of personalities over the course of the next 60 minutes. In other words, you picked a great day to be with us.
No, I think so too. And obviously, there's never a shortage of SEC news, but you got to love the Phil Steele stuff. I know that you said it wasn't your favorite magazine, but diving into this stuff gives us so many talking points.
Yeah, it doesn't mean I don't want to talk about it, even if it's not my absolute favorite magazine. Before that, we got big news to get to. At least what I think is pretty big news here, at least big report. Item number one on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We have talked about the transfer saga, graduate transfer saga of Brandon Kennedy. The offensive lineman for Alabama was looking to make a new home for himself in the SEC. Auburn was a rumored suitor. Tennessee, I guess, was sort of always kind of thought to be the leader, and now Tennessee may actually be the winner of his services based on a report from Rivals.com. Let me show you, as Austin Price, I think is the reporter's name, Austin Price from the Tennessee Rivals side saying, breaking. Alabama grad transfer Brandon Kennedy arrives on Rocky Top and joins the Tennessee program. Now this has ramifications for both programs, more significant for Tennessee than it is for Alabama. The significance from the Tennessee standpoint is, and we'll start with this, Tennessee needs players.
Yeah.
And if you get somebody that was good enough eventually to have gotten a scholarship from Alabama, well, you've probably got a player that's good enough to play at Tennessee right now. So from that standpoint, it looks like a big win for Tennessee.
No, I think so. And listen, it doesn't matter what Brandon Kennedy was at Alabama. It doesn't matter what he's going to be at Tennessee. The fact is they need bodies. They need bodies at Tennessee. They need depth. They need offensive linemen probably more than any other position on the field, especially when you add in the question marks around Trey Smith. So this is a huge win for Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee. There's no other way to slice it. I mean, I don't think Alabama misses Brandon Kennedy a ton without some injuries up front. But I think that he finds a place to become a huge part of this football team under Jeremy Pruitt.
So
he's got 2 years, by the way.
Right, so we agree that it's a huge win for Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee, but what I'll say that you may not join me in is it's also a huge win for Tennessee over and against Alabama, because this is something that Nick Saban didn't want to see happen. Even if Brandon Kennedy's not going to be in the plans for Alabama, barring a whole bunch of injuries, Saban had some problems with this entire issue. Let's go back to the SEC spring meetings there in Destin. When Saban spoke to the media, the subject of these kinds of transfers came up, and Saban let his emotions be known and his feelings be known, including this rant right here. Take a listen.
I don't think it should be on me. I think we should change the rule. All right, if we agree in the SEC at these meetings that we're going to have free agency in our league and everybody can go wherever they want to go when they graduate, and that's what's best for the game, then I think that's what we should do. Then Brandon Kennedy can go wherever he wants to go. But if we don't do that, why is it on me? Because we have a conference rule that says he can't do it. And he can do it, but he's supposed to sit out for a year. So why is it on me? It's not even my decision. It's a conference rule. I always give people releases. And he has a release to go wherever he wants to go, but the conference rule says he can't go to the conference. So why is that on me?
Saban would continue his rant by saying this.
The Maurice Smith thing wasn't on me either.
Would you like just clarity on it's either the rule or it's not the rule? It seems like there's a rule.
Let me ask you a question. If we make a
not.
rule that guys can transfer whenever they want to transfer, how are we supposed to get people to do what they should do? I'm not talking about as football players. I'm talking about as people. I'm talking about making good choices and decisions off the field. I'm talking about doing the right things academically. So if a guy's missing class and I say, you're not going to play in this game because you're missing class, which I've done on occasion, and then he just says, well, I'm transferring. Is that good? I don't know. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm asking you all a question. You don't ever seem to have to answer the questions like that.
It seemed like
you
in this case it's going to
Brooke Trout look. You know?
And then, because it's just too juicy not to hear some more of this, the great Saban rant on the subject of Brandon Kennedy. Here's one final clip from Saban on this point.
It would seem like it'd be different in this case for graduates and undergraduates. The graduates can just go and the undergraduates would still have to sit out. Would that be fine, or would that be different?
I think that's a rule that's something that we should address as a league.
So will you agree with me when Saban clearly did not want to see Brandon Kennedy go from his program to another SEC school, the fact that his old assistant Jeremy Pruitt's gotten him, this is a win for the mentee against the mentor. The pupil has become the teacher, so to speak. That this is a win for Tennessee against Nick Saban and Alabama. Would you agree with that?
It's a small stretch. It's a small stretch in my eyes. And listen, I will admit the fact that I don't think Nick Saban wanted to see this rule put into place. I don't think he wanted to see this rule put into place for college football or the SEC as a whole. I don't know if it was so much focused on Brandon Kennedy and not wanting him to go to Tennessee. I think that Nick Saban looks at it and says, boy, there's an opportunity for you at Tennessee, and that's a good spot, but are we really going to open this can of worms? If anything, I think this is, and I guess it's in my corner, I'm not ready to say that it's a huge victory for Jeremy Pruitt to get one of Bama's backup players. I think that's where I'm try not to cross the line here. Now, do I think that Nick Saban wanted this rule in place? Absolutely not. I think that he was against this rule from the get-go. I was not. I was in favor of giving Brandon Kennedy the opportunity to go to a place like Tennessee where he could play. I'm just not sure that Pruitt getting a huge win over Saban, I'm not sure I'm ready to stretch it.
Okay, but the comparison for me is you heard Saban mention the name a moment ago. Maurice Smith, who in Kirby Smart's first year in 2016 in Georgia, left Alabama to go play for Georgia. Now, it worked out great for Smith. He was Georgia's MVP defensively that season. Remains to be seen what kind of impact Brandon Kennedy makes at Tennessee. But there was a symbolic message about Kirby. That was a battle, by the way. That was a legitimate battle, Georgia versus Alabama, to get Maurice Smith. Georgia won that. And for me, it was a symbolic deal of Kirby Smart said to Nick Saban back in 2016, I don't work for you anymore. In fact, I'm now actively working against you.
Yeah.
To me, that's Jeremy Pruitt doing his own thing here. He's saying, not only do I not work for you anymore, I'm actually working against you. I'm actively trying to do something that you don't want to happen. So there is a symbolic gesture here that makes Jeremy Pruitt's stature grow just a bit because he's picking on the biggest bull in the woods.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I just think that I look at it more in terms of generality. Like I look at it as Saban didn't want any grad transfer leaving anywhere. You know what I'm saying? It didn't want any of these rules being in place. Didn't want somebody coming from another program to his program. Didn't want to open that can of worms.
But you don't really believe that.
I do. No, I think that Nick Saban, in terms of it being a general rule, was against this being passed. I don't think it had to be with, boy,
but he's
I really
taken
don't want
other transfers from other SEC programs before.
He has. I mean, I think that's something that's a whole different conversation, though. I don't think that Nick Saban looked specifically at Brandon Kennedy and said, boy, I don't want you to go play for Jeremy Pruitt. I don't think it was that specific is what I'm trying to say. I don't think he wanted the rule at all. I don't think it was so much, boy, I'm trying to play keep away from Jeremy up in Knoxville. I don't think that he looked that deep into it.
Charles Lynn says you can't explain, or you can't distinguish an explanation from a rant. Listen, that was far more rant than explanation, at least from my perspective. Michael Cooper says I sound like Alex Jones. Listen, talk to Tennessee fans about this. They're going to be happy today. And by the way, Brandon Kennedy doesn't have to win what's the award that goes to top offensive lineman?
Allen Trophy or Remington. It would be the Remington for him.
He doesn't have to win the Remington Trophy for this to be a nice deal. You can't beat Alabama on the field yet. It's not the third Saturday in October. But you can beat them for, listen, if Nick Saban's mad, then Tennessee's doing something right. In this instance, that's what's going on.
Yeah. I'll go down that road with you for a second. And I think this is way more of a win for Tennessee than it is a loss for Alabama. Let's just put it that way.
I don't disagree with that.
I think we can meet in the middle a little bit on that topic and say, having the depth. I put this in terms of Madre London, the guy coming from Michigan State. Now, was this guy a Heisman Trophy frontrunner at Michigan State?
Right.
Absolutely not. Can Tennessee use him to the best of his ability? 100%. And that's kind of the situation we're looking at Brandon Kennedy. They don't have, not only do they not have much talent up front, they don't have much experience. They don't have much of anything up front of the offensive line at Tennessee right now. So to get a guy like this that Jeremy Pruitt has seen with his own two eyes in college settings, I think that's what the biggest deal is. Jeremy Pruitt knows what he's getting and still continue to go after this guy.
And the final point for me on this, I saw an Alabama fan in the comment section say this. You also kind of said this a moment ago, too, it's Tennessee getting excited about taking a backup player from Alabama. Have you seen these scores in the field lately? I mean, Alabama's beating everybody badly, destroyed Tennessee badly. Tennessee's winless in the SEC a year ago. Who is Tennessee to turn up its nose in Alabama backup right now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And that's just, honestly, that's the nature of the beast right now in terms of Jeremy Pruitt trying to create roster turnover. He said it after the spring game. I mean, he said after the spring game, listen, Some of these guys don't want to do it the right way, and there's people coming. There's freshmen showing up. There's people that are getting healthy that have been injured. There's other people showing up from other programs, and we're going to get this roster turnover point in the right direction. I give Jeremy Pruitt credit because he's followed through on all his words after that spring game so far.
All right, let's do item number 2 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. ESPN.com recently, for its preseason top 25, took a look at what was going to be the most important game for each of its preseason top 25 teams. The Alabama Crimson Tide up at the top of that list, and maybe no surprise here that Alex Scarborough, writing for ESPN.com, thinks the Iron Bowl matchup at the end of the regular season against Auburn will be the most important game for Alabama. Here is the explanation from Scarborough. Once again, he says, Alabama saves the best for last with what has become an almost annual SEC championship play-in game against Auburn in the regular season. The rest of the season, with the Lamar Jackson-less Louisville and Tennessee and Missouri out of the East, could turn out to be a cakewalk otherwise. You almost hear a hint of wishful thinking on the part of Alex Scarborough that hopefully the Iron Bowl will be good. Otherwise, it's going to be a very boring Alabama season for people who are not Crimson Tide fans. That very well may be true. But how about you from the Alabama perspective, or really just as an observer of the SEC? Is the Iron Bowl that crucial for Alabama this year?
I think it's always going to be the crucial game. I think it's almost easy at this point for Alex Scarborough to look at it and say, boy, that Iron Bowl is going to mean a lot. I mean, it is. It always does. But I actually have, in these even-numbered years when Bama goes to Baton Rouge, that game, looking at the schedule, looking forward, always concerns me more. It always concerns me more when Bama goes down to Baton Rouge and Auburn's coming to Tuscaloosa, that Bama goes down and slips up in Baton Rouge. Bama's won a few games in a row against LSU. I mean, they just have. But none of them have been that. You don't feel good about that game, especially the ones down in Baton Rouge. I mean, the ones down in Baton Rouge, a couple of overtime games, some field goal games that Bama should have lost have been down in Baton Rouge over the last few years. So while I always give the credit to Auburn, I think the Iron Bowl is a special game and it can really twist the seasons around. It did last year. I mean, it threw a complete wrench into everything Alabama was trying to do. I got to have Bama cross that threshold that is the game down in Baton Rouge first before I can move on to the Iron Bowl and say, boy, that's the one that makes the year.
On YouTube, Bradley Fail says the Iron Bowl's only crucial if Auburn comes in with one loss or less. In other words, Alabama probably still wins the division even if it doesn't win the game. But here's the thing I would remind Bradley, who I'm assuming is an Alabama fan, maybe not, but I'm assuming he's an Alabama fan. Here's the one thing I would remind here. If Auburn could somehow, some way, regardless of its record, regardless of Alabama's record, if Auburn wins the Iron Bowl this season, that puts the Tigers at 3-3 in the last 6 against Alabama.
Yeah.
And that particular record, 50-50 over the course of the last 6 years, that flies in the face of the dominant narrative, which is that Alabama has dominated the SEC. Auburn could rightly say, you know what, you really haven't dominated us. We're actually sort of getting the best of each other here to the tune of a 500 record here over the course of the last 6 years. And that is kind of interesting because that's not what you think it has been, but that's how quickly things can change in the SEC. An Auburn win this season, obviously they're going to be a pretty significant underdog, but an Auburn win this season would be quite a narrative changer for this Iron Bowl rivalry.
I completely agree with that. And that's just the nature of the beast right now if you're an Auburn fan looking at it hoping to get over that hump. And that's the reason I do go back to the Tuscaloosa deal, where the game is being played at. I think that when you look at the games that Bama has lost, they've been in Auburn. That one last year was not that close, but the kick 6 back in 2013, that was a close game in every stretch of the imagination, and Bama loses that one in Auburn as well. So you got to go all the way back to 2010 before Auburn beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and obviously that was a crazy game. I agree with you, though. I mean, if Auburn's able to pull it off this year, there is nothing to do if you're an Alabama fan or an SEC fan than to give credit for Auburn for that.
Brian Hart has an interesting comment on the YouTube comment section. He says, how important can the Iron Bowl be? Alabama lost the game last year and still won the national championship. From that standpoint, the way that Greinhardt described it, you can make a case the Iron Bowl maybe not all that important. But the one thing that I've sort of held on to this offseason, I'm not in the state of Alabama every day, so I could be wrong about this. But I feel like there's a level of bragging rights that Auburn has against Alabama because it beat Alabama head-to-head that's not completely diminished by the fact that Alabama went on to win the national championship. In other words, if you're sitting around with your family for Sunday dinner and you got the Auburn cousin over here, the Alabama cousin over here, the Auburn cousin's not shutting up just because the Alabama guy won the national championship. He's still coming back with but I saw that game in November and we beat you. So from that standpoint, I would sort of push back against Greinhardt and say, come on, that national championship is not shutting these Auburn folks up right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've talked to Auburn fans that do feel that way. I mean, even Auburn fans, when they talk to Georgia fans, it's like, hey, you know what? You couldn't beat us on our home field. You had to take us to a neutral site. There are bragging rights to be had there, and there's no escaping that. I mean, it is what it is. The Iron Bowl stands amongst itself when you compare any team to anything else.
Well, you mentioned a little bit of a jab towards Georgia's direction. If you're Auburn, I'll give you one from Gus Malzahn right here, who's speaking a couple of months ago in talking about the 2017 season, thought it was his team, not Georgia, who almost did, but his team that was the only one capable of beating Alabama in the 2017 season. Here's Gus Malzahn on that point.
We got a lot of guys coming back, and we felt all along this year that we were the only team that could beat Alabama. Of course, they ended up being that way, and we got a lot of guys coming back. I know they're very hungry, and anytime you've been close and you have everybody coming back or a lot of guys coming back, it really helps you. And I know we're going to be a hungry team. Now, you got to earn it in our league. The SEC West is a monster. Every week you got to bring your lunch, but I really like where we're at.
So, yeah, listen, he thought they were the only ones capable of doing that. And as I'm listening to Malzahn speak there, I'm thinking about what some of the commenters have said, and I want to hear Malzahn add to that statement there. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we got to win enough games to make the Alabama game matter in November, right? I mean, It's got to be more than just a in-state bragging rights deal. If Auburn loses to Washington, I don't think they will, but if Auburn were to lose to Washington, there is a little bit of a peg diminished in that Iron Bowl come November. And so you sort of add that into the Gus Malzahn comments a bit there.
No, I think you should. And listen, there's always going to be a ton of attention on the Iron Bowl, and you have to give credit to who win the games. I mean, it's just like any other game. I mean, Alabama circled back around and won the national title. Trust me, I'm not celebrating any less because they lost to Auburn in the Iron Bowl, but when you do talk to an Auburn fan, Alabama fans and Auburn fans interact every single day. You have to give them credit where credit's due. I mean, they won that game. It wasn't, and see, it's different than in years past for me too, because the kick six was what it was. The comeback in 2010, it's one of those games that could go either way. That game was won handily last year by Auburn. I mean, those games that Auburn won last year were handily.
By the way, in the comment section, Oliver Bacon says, but wait, Auburn couldn't even beat UCF, so obviously the trash talk goes round and round and will continue to do so for months and months and years to come. Let me do item number 3 here for a moment on SEC Country Live, on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Pete Futak is a longtime college football writer. He writes for College Football News, and I had Pete on my program this morning, Dog Nation Daily. And one of the reasons why I had Pete on the show, Mike, is because he had written something in his preview of UGA up at College Football News about how for Georgia, because it broke through, got to a national championship game a year ago, the recruiting success that goes along with that now it's sort of a scenario of, for Georgia fans, it's either you win the national championship or the season's essentially no fun. And he said that's not necessarily the attitude that Georgia fans should have, but it's the attitude that they will have. Here's a little bit of Pete Futak explaining the current mindset that probably populates most of the minds of UGA fans.
Good thing. You want to have a program that's close to playing for the national championship. You love having the expectations there. But at the same time, it's almost like, okay, we just have to get there or else. It's so hard to win it. Everything's got to break the right way now. And the good part about this is now, Kirby Smart in Georgia coming off a great year with a great recruiting class. Now the expectation is, yes, you're at that get to the college football playoff level every year.
So I think that's really interesting. As I said, Pete Futak, I had to edit the comment for time's sake, but he did go on to say that just making the college football playoff ought to be good enough for anybody. But for UGA fans, much like Ohio State fans have been, Alabama fans have been, it's sort of a no-fun scenario unless you're holding that trophy up at the end of the season. And I tell you all the time, you're the expert on players, I'm the expert on fans. But I want to ask you a fan-related question on this. You've seen Alabama be at that standard for a while.
Right.
Is it truly no fun unless you win it all? And is that the place that Georgia has now arrived?
I think that, and you'd have to answer that question for me. I don't know if Georgia's really arrived at that point or not. I mean, I wasn't into the fanhood until after we won a national championship. So moving on to that, it was like, boy, we really are a letdown. The Capital One Bowl in 2010 was a letdown. I mean, going 10-3 that year or whatever it was a letdown. I mean, you didn't feel good about the season, especially with all the talent they had. I think it remains to be seen for me. And listen, I hate feeling like anything less than a championship is not a fun season.
That's really the point of this whole conversation.
That makes me sick. Honestly, that makes me sick to my stomach, and that comes from somebody that, to me, is a national media member looking at a program, because it's like, hey, you know what? I don't have to pay attention to these guys in January unless they're talking about championship.
Well, I'll defend Pete Futak on this. The point that he makes, though, is he arrives at this opinion because of what other SEC fan bases and big-time fan bases like Ohio State have sort of told him in the past, that there is is this huge level of negativity. I mean, Don Lester in the Facebook comment section says it. He says all the pressure in the East is on Georgia. To a certain extent, I guess I'd kind of agree with that, and I think that's what Pete Futak means when he says it's no fun, because waking up every day, only being able to meet expectations and running the risk of not matching those expectations, that's kind of no fun. Whereas you can be a lot of SEC teams this year and be better than people think. If you're Georgia and you were in the playoff a year ago, unless you're winning like 11 games at least, then you're actually below the expectation that most people are going to have for you, which makes the likelihood of a bad season far greater than a good season, because the definition of what a good season is now very narrow.
I had somebody tell me this a few years ago about Alabama football under Nick Saban, and it made so much sense to me. Nick Saban always used to tell us the fun is in the winning. When you're in Alabama. For fans, the fun is in the stress. I think. When you're at that level, I think the fun comes in the stress. Like, it's more of a relief after you win than a happiness feeling. You get relieved, like, boy, didn't lose to Ole Miss this year, or didn't let Johnny Manziel get us again this year, or you didn't let Auburn beat us this year. It's almost like a relief, and the fun comes from being stressed out about it. It's like you're running this gauntlet, you continue to win, but you're still stressed out that next team is always the team that can get you.
Maurice Carter on the Facebook comment section says it's not about the aspect of fun; it's the anticipation of expecting to win the national championship, and that can drive the fun away if you don't accomplish your expectations. I sort of agree with Maurice on that a bit. James Crump says winning is always fun. And while I agree with James, I think here's the problem that you run into. As a college football fan, we spend our whole year getting ready for September, October, November. But then once the season gets here, here's where the no fun part comes in. And for a program like Alabama, this is definitely true. You can decide for yourself if now Georgia's in this discussion. You can end up wishing the entire season away. Alabama's a 30-point favorite against Louisville. Well, let's hurry up and get this game over so we can play the next game. For Georgia, it's a bad week one opponent, then it's South Carolina. But Georgia's still a 2-touchdown favorite over South Carolina. Let's hurry up and get to October and play LSU, or let's hurry up and get into November and play Auburn. All of a sudden, you've hurried up through all these games, and the entire season's over. You only get 12 of them, and if you define it as national championship or bust, then most of those 12 games don't matter at all, and therefore you end up putting all your eggs in the one basket. And listen, anybody can lose any one game.
I just hate that, though. I hate that for Georgia fans to think of it that way, because, here's a program that, of all the good things they did last year, it's still been a while since the national championship was won. And so I would like to think that getting back to, an SEC title or getting the playoffs still, it means something.
Well, I would agree with that. Look, I don't think many Georgia fans would be like gnashing a whole bunch of teeth this year if it's playoff and no national championship. I think I speak on behalf of Georgia fans when I say by 2019, Georgia fans will want to have won a national championship. By 2019, if Georgia hasn't won a national championship, I think a lot of Dog fans are going to think they're off schedule.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's got to be a slow build. Let's remember that Kirby Smart is, 43? And this guy's going to be at Georgia for a long time. And so I understand it, and I think that's going to be actually the reality, but it still, for me, kind of stinks.
Enrique Murillo says it doesn't take the fun away from me at all. I'm a game-by-game fan. That's an interesting comment from Enrique on YouTube. And 98 Sports Talk, much the same way, says Georgia needs to win the East, needs to focus on that first goal, and we'll see where it goes after that. By the way, we'll have more on that topic later on in the show. Now here on SEC Country Live, let's move on to item number 4 on our SEC Country First and 10 list. And what I would say, and I think you would say, is a competitor and a contender for top player in the SEC, regardless of position here in 2018, may be LSU linebacker Devin White. He is the leading returning tackler in the league for 2018 and the leading returning guy in terms of compiling tackles for loss. When Dave Aranda, the LSU defensive coordinator, recently made an appearance on a Louisiana radio station, he obviously had a lot of nice things to say about one of the anchors of the Tigers defense. Here is Aranda from the radio in Louisiana talking about Devin White.
I love the players here. I immediately think of the linebacker core, and I think of Devin White and the improvements that he's made and his hunger to be a better player. He's at the office before I'm up there on Sundays, wanting to know how he can get better. And so I know he's going to have a great year this next season.
So that's Dave Aranda saying he knows that Devin White's going to have a great year. I think you and I would agree with this. But Phil Steele, our aforementioned college football analyst who writes the Phil Steele College Football Preview, in his magazine, which is on newsstands now, he's got his first team All-SEC linebackers, and he doesn't have Devin White mentioned. Now, we should point out, this is not an official list. This is just one guy's opinion for the most part. But how in the world do you snub Devin White as a first-team All-SEC linebacker? That to me seems pretty egregious.
It's a head scratcher. I mean, it's a head scratcher for me. When I looked at it, I'm like, was there just a lapse in judgment, or was there, did you miss what Devin White was able to do last year? Devin White had like 15 more tackles than anybody else in the SEC last year. And while I know that Roquan Smith was an animal, I mean, you look at the people that replaced him with, that's Charles Wright from Vandy and David Reese from Florida. I really like David Reese, think he's a good player. Tyrell Dodson from Texas A&M, nice linebacker.
I couldn't pick
any of them out of a lineup.
I really couldn't.
You couldn't.
I really couldn't.
That's kind of the crazy thing to me is when you look at some of these guys, it's like, where are we coming up with this? And I think, like I said, I think that David Reese is a nice player. I think Tyrell Dodson's a nice player. I don't know much about Charles Wright, to be completely honest with you. But Devin White, to me, if I had to put a list for the Butkus Award, I mean, he's one of the front runners for me for the Butkus Award. How he doesn't make preseason All-SEC, I don't know.
And listen, I don't want to hammer Phil Steele here too much because, like I said, this is just one guy's opinion. But I guess I am a little bit curious to find out, is this potentially the start of maybe a trend here where maybe White's not going to get as much attention nationally as he's going to get on shows like this here in the SEC, where it comes up in our comment section all the time. We have a lot of LSU fans that watch the show. They mention Devin White regularly. I mean, is this one of the deals where nationally he doesn't have the same reputation as he does here within the SEC and certainly within the state of Louisiana?
There's a chance. And listen, I watched Devin White a lot last year. I was a big fan of his. And there was games where I looked at him and thought, boy, he's not doing as much as I want him to. Because, I mean, I think he's so good. I think I just hold him to a high standard where I'm like, this guy should be shedding blocks, making tackles. And last year, I brought up the Troy game where he had a ton of tackles. I mean, I think he had double-digit tackles, but he didn't do everything I want him to. I think he changed that this year, though. And everybody that talked about it afterwards, Devin White going into Ed Orgeron's office and saying, what can I do to make this team better? I think that tells me all I need to know about the guy.
Cliff Nelson, who's an LSU fan in our YouTube comment section, says, who's going to be a better linebacker in the pros? Roquan Smith, who was the big-time inside linebacker from Georgia last year. He's with Chicago now. Or Devin White, wherever he goes. Here's the one thing, and yes, I know, and I try to be very honest with you all, I am a Georgia fan, so obviously I love Roquan. But the one thing I'll say about Roquan in comparison to Devin White, go back and look at Roquan last year. That young man had 98 solo tackles. Okay, I mean, so maybe Devin White finished with more total tackles than Roquan did a year ago, but in terms of the solo tackles, I mean, Roquan Smith had nearly 100 solo tackles a year ago. That's the one thing I would like to see more from Devin, especially in this new age of spread football. You don't just be a pile jumper. You show me that you can make a one-on-one tackle too.
Right, and it's also what kind of tackle are you making? And I think that's kind of the point you're trying to make is, are we dragging guys down?
Right.
Are we hitting running backs in the legs and they're still getting 6 yards? Or are we stuffing the hole and taking somebody backwards? Or are we flying sideline to sideline when they try to run these fast sweeps?
Yeah.
And we're getting to them? Because I think that's what that to me is what put Roquan ahead of Devin White last year, is that Devin White's good, but sideline to sideline is where Roquan was getting these tackles for loss in the backfield.
Now, it should be pointed out, by the way, that Devin White maybe not getting noticed by a preseason All-SEC list, that may not be too much of a problem for him because, as he explained recently, the element of surprise sneaking up on some offense in the SEC this year, that's something I think he kind of likes. In fact, he recently said that he thinks the LSU defense overall may have a few surprises in store for 2018. Here's Devin White.
We got a lot of stuff that we won't even run in the spring game. We're going to keep it simple. But, just when we come September, when we play in Miami, we'll pull some stuff out the hat that nobody has seen before because we just put it in this spring.
So flying under the radar may be what Devin White wants to do.
And I think that's the right attitude to have in any situation. I think that we spend so much time talking about guys trying to find the edge and talking about how their back's against the wall and all this thing. And then when they do get snubbed, it's like, how could that happen? These guys like that. I mean, they like kind of flying under the radar.
Shannon Burgess, on the subject of Devin White, maybe not making quite enough solo tackles yet, says, hey, you can't penalize White for the team swarming around making tackles. Now, I'm not going to say anything here. I'm going to ask you. You're the expert.
No, I answer.
You're the analyst. Would you describe the 2017 LSU defense as swarming around and making a bunch of tackles?
In some instances, yes. I mean, I think that's definitely, but I promise you, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Go look at what Devin White's solo tackles were last year and rank them in the SEC, and I'm telling you, I don't even think they're top 20. I really don't. He had like 130 tackles last year, but I don't even think his solos were top 20. It was a lot of game tackling, and that does give credit to the rest of the LSU defense, but when there's that much disparity, when you're not even in the top 20, but you're the number one tackler, I think there is something to look at.
Maurice Norman on the Facebook comment section says flying under the radar is actually the Arkansas Razorbacks. We've seen some Arkansas love in the comment section the last couple of days.
We really have.
Yeah.
And listen, there's some things happening up in Arkansas. I'm not ready to change around the way I see the SEC West playing out, but I do think that Chad Morris is the closer we get, maybe getting their quarterback on campus this summer, I think that, good things are happening.
Greg Steele on the Facebook comment section piling on Shannon Burgess in the YouTube comment section. Shannon talked about the swarming LSU defense. Greg Steele says Did they swarm Troy? At some point in time, I mean, when does the statute of limitations on hammering LSU for losing to Troy, when does that end? Does that go forever?
I get the Louisiana Monroe game gets brought up to me every other week. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. But I think that most fans have to take a hard look in the mirror and say, okay, did LSU lose to Troy and beat my team last year? Because LSU still beat a pretty good amount of SEC teams.
Christy Hardy, by the way, also bringing up that same point on Facebook, saying, "Oh, we still stuck on Troy." I mean, at some point in time, I do think you have to let the LSU folks up off the mat about the Troy thing. It's not like we're in here talking about Florida losing to Georgia Southern every day. I mean, at a certain point, you got to let them off the mat, right?
When LSU lost that game last year, I tweeted it out and I got on the show and I said the same thing. We have all been there. I mean, every single program in the SEC has been in those shoes. You don't see me. I don't get on here and hammer LSU for losing to Troy because, listen, those things happen. I think at some point you got to let it go, but I'm not going to be the judge.
Well, I'll make a slightly different point here. In 2015, Georgia played Georgia Southern. Georgia's obviously never lost to Georgia Southern. They're like a 17-point favorite. Won the game in overtime, and I swear that team celebrated like they won the national championship.
Right.
There's a part of me that would rather Georgia just lost. I mean, if you're going to celebrate the win like that, I just assume you've lost.
I know. I mean, listen, there was losing to Louisiana Monroe, I mean, I've had pretty good luck in my life. It was one of the worst days of my life. I mean, it really was. Walking out the field, I didn't even want to go back to practice the next day.
Jared Seegers is still making fun of the Ed Orgeron voice. Yeah, that's one of those things that's not going to end anytime soon. All right, let's do number 5. Topic number 5 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We made mention before of the preseason top 25 over at ESPN, and the most important game for each of these teams, as decided on by some of the ESPN writers. Texas A&M makes its stop in the list there for ESPN. And the most important game for the Aggies, well, that's kind of an interesting one. For Alex Scarborough, writing here for ESPN.com, he mentions that early non-conference game against Clemson. Here's what Alex Scarborough says about Texas A&M and Clemson. He says, the Aggies aren't going to contend in the West, not in Jimbo Fisher's first year. There's just too much work to be done on both sides of the ball. But in the first big-time game at home against playoff contender Clemson, Fisher would do well to make it competitive and thereby set the right tone for the program moving forward. Once again, that's Alex Scarborough for ESPN.com. I don't really agree with virtually anything Scarborough says there. Now, I don't think that A&M is going to win the West, but I do think it's got a chance to beat some SEC West teams. And playing Clemson close, pardon my bad grammar, it ain't going to do nothing for Aggies fans.
No. I agree.
They're not patting anybody on the back for playing anybody close. Now, I hope the A&M Clemson game is close because I want to watch it, but there is no Texas A&M fan that's going to show up in our comment section on Monday after a Clemson A&M game. You see how close we made it versus Clemson.
Right, yeah.
That is not what A&M fans are about.
I completely agree. And honestly, and we've talked about this before on the show, I'm not counting A&M out of this game at all.
Okay.
I'm really not. And obviously they have a ton of work to do on the offensive line before they even think about winning this game. I mean, Coda Martin's gone, Eric McCoy's back at center, but they need to find some pieces along the offensive line if they're even going to think about blocking this Clemson defensive line. But how many times have we talked about the quarterback position at Clemson, some of the offensive line positions at Clemson, the fact that this is really early in the season? I mean, this could be where you see the transition from one quarterback to the other. I mean, honestly, going into that place,
that's a good point.
This could be where it happens. And so I think the word for me for that game is opportunity. I think A&M has an opportunity to make themselves heard.
Jamie Blanton, who's a South Carolina fan, says A&M's not going to beat, he says, I'll say Clemson. He says Auburn's an exponentially better team than A&M and should have beaten Clemson the past 2 years if not for subpar coaching by Gus Malzahn, and Gus is better than Jimbo. That's a lot of opinions crammed into one comment there from Jamie. I like that a lot. Scott Lawson disagrees, though, takes the other side. He says A&M has a very real shot at beating Clemson. I also like how Scott put the ATM kind of logo within his comment there. That's pretty clever. Bo Molinari, who's a big Texas A&M fan, says, I'm sick of tired of hearing that A&M won't compete next season. Just denial. Schmitty's getting the boys ready for next year. I don't know who Schmitty is, but is it the new strength coach they brought up from Oklahoma? That may be who that is. That's good stuff there from Bo. Let me read one more comment. Indy Anderson on Facebook says, Texas A&M beating Clemson. Y'all are going to be in a rude awakening when it comes to Jimbo. You act as if he just had one bad season at Florida State. He was murdered by Louisville 63-21 2 years ago. Got embarrassed by Oregon 3 years ago. So Indy obviously not very high on Jimbo Fisher there.
Let me ask you a question though, and this is obviously we're gonna have a ton of back and forth about the way people think about Texas A&M this year. But as an SEC fan, why would you not root for A&M to beat Clemson? I mean, why would you not want a team that nobody expects to win the SEC? Why would you not want them to just absolutely run away with a game against the runaway favorite in the ACC? I think there's nothing bad to be said. If you're rooting for Texas A&M over Clemson, I don't blame you. I mean, I'm rooting for them over.
Yeah.
Clemson.
Now the issue here is to go back to the ESPN writer who said, "Hey, is this a deal where A&M can keep it close against Clemson?" I think the question you and I would ask is, what happens when it is close? Well, what Jimbo Fisher said in the past is, in these close games, these close moments, he wants to find a way to steal a few of these. Here's Jimbo.
You got to prepare them. You got to put them in last plays of the game, last situations of the game, from the 5-yard line, 3-yard line, 10-yard line, 15-yard line, 18-yard line. Minute 32 timeouts, 40 seconds, no timeouts. You're trying to get a field goal, trying to get a touchdown. 2 minutes before the half. How you come out the second half. I mean, all those you got to get them to think those situations. How you can, as I say, steal ball games or steal momentum. You know what I'm saying?
So listen, that's how he's using his spring practices. That's at least when that comment was made. My expectation is that's how he'll use his summer practices as well. And I understand why some people are down on Jimbo. It obviously did not finish well for him at Florida State. I mean, it just didn't. But you know what? I mean, I'm gonna look at a whole body of work here. I'm gonna look at the entirety of Jimbo's coaching career, going back when he was an offensive coordinator at LSU, and going back to the totality of his time there at Florida State. This guy's a pretty good coach.
I agree, and to me, this is not a shot at Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State, but he's the opposite of Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State, in my opinion.
Yeah.
If he can find the players, that he has been in that driver's seat to drive that bus to a national championship. It's a check mark. I mean, you can say whatever you want to about the way he left. You can say whatever you want to about the letdowns. You can say whatever you want to about the way he, coached against Dabo. Whatever you want. He has won a national title, and for that reason, you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
I like Josh Griffin's comment, who says the 12th man's going to be a big factor for Clemson. I don't think Clemson's ever played in a place that loud. I don't know what the loudest ACC stadium is. Maybe Lane Stadium there in Blacksburg. That's obviously a lot smaller than Kyle Field's going to be. I am looking forward to seeing how much those A&M fans get behind the Aggies in a game like this, because I just believe they got to be chomping at the bit.
I agree, and we, I've said it a couple of times on the show. I think in terms of spring, A&M had the best spring, and it had a lot to do with their players and the product they put on the field and what Jimbo Fisher was able to do in a short period of time. Also had a ton to do with that crowd at their spring game, which I think was 65,000. Pretty good turnout. I think that those people are extremely hungry for a different brand of football.
Valslave over on YouTube says Clemson ran Jimbo Fisher out of the whole league, and there's obviously some people who've made that point before, which makes it ironic the fact that Jimbo's first big game at Texas A&M is against the program. A lot of people think he got tired of playing in the ACC.
No, I by no means do I think Jimbo ran from anything in the ACC. I mean, he was a good coach and did a lot of good things. It is funny to me the irony that he's facing Clemson as soon as he gets there, though.
Cliff Nelson, final point here. This is also on YouTube. He says Clemson has a great game day atmosphere. It rivals any SEC stadium. I think the point that the commenter was making a moment ago, though, is those fans are cheering for Clemson. This will be the loudest environment of people cheering against Clemson that they are used to hearing. But I am going to give Death Valley credit. I know the South Carolina fans watching right now won't like this, but those Clemson fans, they do get after it. They play cool music over in the loudspeakers. I like the touching of the rock. It's a great atmosphere. It's a good atmosphere.
They would be on my list of stadiums I would go to outside of the SEC. I would go to Virginia Tech as well, but I would make the clip to Clemson, South Carolina.
All right, item number 6 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. I've told you probably 10,000 times that I do a show every morning called Dog Nation Daily. It's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, in case you're curious. Earlier in the show, I played some audio from Pete Futak from College Football News, was on the show talking about, the relationship that Georgia fans going to have this upcoming season. But the other warning that Pete had for the audience of UGA fans on my show today was the chances of an improved SEC East. Now, this flies in the face of what I tell you every single day, but if you listen to Pete right here, we know that South Carolina is probably going to be pretty good. People have respect for Drew Lock in Missouri, but Pete Futak from College Football News says don't sleep on both Florida and Tennessee. Here is Pete Fiutak to discuss.
Tennessee and Florida, kind of the same boat, different thing. Tennessee's going to be better. They're not going to win the SEC East, but they're going to at least not be a speed bump like they were last year. And they did have their chances. If they didn't lose, on that last second throw, to Florida, and they had a couple of other close calls along the way, and then they just melted down obviously at the end. But there's enough talent there where they can be a danger. Florida, I do think, can flip that switch quickly. Remember, they did go to 2 straight SEC championships under Jim McElwain. So there's enough there where if you get the right formula on the right day, they can absolutely rise up and rock just that one day in a cocktail party where they can pull off that upset win. They could be good enough under Mullen to just have that tweak offensively right out of the gate.
So I play the audio because I want to be fair and balanced, effort at, bringing all points of view to the show. I don't have to tell you, though, I don't believe a word of that. Now, I like Pete Fiutak. I think he's a good analyst. I think he's as wrong can be. He's the wrongest guy on the internet when it comes to Tennessee and Florida, though.
No, I did. Here's the thing about saying the SEC East is going to improve is I think when you look at the matchups, and I've brought this stat up a couple of times on the show, the SEC West was 12-2 against the SEC East last year. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough pill to swallow when you really look at some of the matchups. I think the matchups have actually gotten harder this year. When you look at what Florida at Mississippi State and have LSU coming to Gainesville, when you look at Tennessee, who's going to have Auburn and Bama as their crossover opponents, that's an uphill climb. And so while I think that these teams are both on their way to getting better, it's hard for me to look at something and really, grasp something that tells me the SEC East is going to be better in the long run. I'm a lot higher on Florida than most people I've talked to. I really am. I'm kind of out on a limb with that, but I think they still have another year before they really compete to get back to Atlanta, probably.
James Hayes Jr. in the Facebook comment section says the SEC East used to be the powerhouse of football. They need to get back to that expectation. I agree with James on that. I'd love to see some more balance restored to the league. The SEC West is filled with behemoths now. In the 90s, it was the East that was filled with those. Wouldn't it be great if you had big-time programs on both sides? It's weird. In college football, there always seems to be an imbalance between the divisions. In the Big Ten, you've got a huge imbalance in favor of the Big Ten East.
Yeah.
Really, even in the ACC, you've got a big balance in favor of the Atlantic that has both Clemson and Florida State. It's weird how you never seem to have half the good teams spread out amongst the divisions. Right now, it's a huge imbalance in favor of the West. I'd love nothing more than to see the East rise up. I just think realistically we're a long way from getting there. There's no magic trick here. There's no secret that Dan Mullen has that's going to allow him to come in and flip some sort of switch there at Florida. It's really about players, and I have to say it over and over again.
No, and listen, and it's all about head coaches too. And I was a part of those SEC championship games at the end of 2008, 2009 when Urban Meyer was at Florida and Nick was at Alabama and we were facing off. I'm telling you, it was majestic walking into the Georgia Dome for those games. It was there was something energy in the building. Now, I think if Bama and Georgia faced off this year in the SEC championship game again, or for the first time since Kirby Smart's been there, I think it could get that way. But you do want to see the depth rise up under both of these teams on both sides. It does start with Florida getting a good head coach and Tennessee getting a good head coach, and in South Carolina proving they're worth being in that conversation as well.
Jason Sparrow on the Facebook comment section shouting out Big Blue Nation. Jason, we got some good video coming up of Kentucky coach Mark Stoops, so you and the other Wildcats fans stick around for that. We'll do that in a moment. Before that, though, let me just play devil's advocate against my own opinion right now, because as I said, people get tired of hearing me, trash Florida all day long. I want to be as fair to the Gators as I can be. You know that popular internet meme where the guy sitting in what looks like a lemonade stand, he says, I believe blah, 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 tell me why I'm wrong. So tell me why I will be wrong about Florida. If Florida's going to be better than I think, what gets them there? Same for Tennessee. If I'm wrong about Tennessee, what gets the Vols to a more competitive level? Pete Fiutak seems to think that's a possibility. As I've said, I'm sort of skeptical of both these teams right now. I mean, what would have to happen for them to be better?
Well, I think first of all, where people go wrong, in my opinion, about Florida is thinking that Dan Mullen is going to lean on the quarterback this year to have to be the winner of every game. I think Dan Mullen's smart enough to look at an offense and say, boy, Jordan Scarlett's better than most people think. We have an offensive line that when they get in shape should be really, really good. The wide receiver core has the ability to be incredible, especially now with Van Jefferson eligible to compete in that wide receiver core. So, I mean, listen, there's players on that defense. We talked about AL.com's countdown. They have CeCe Jefferson as the preseason defensive lineman of the year. We got Phil Steele with David Reese at the linebacker position. Chauncey Gardner possibly the DB of the year. Look at that secondary. I just think that People look at the quarterback position at Florida and they think, boy, there's no way this team can possibly be good with Kyle Trask or Felipe Franks. I think Dan Mullen is smart enough as a head coach to look around that and say, you know what? I'm not going to put it on these guys. I'm going to put it on the offensive line and the running game and the receivers to make the plays, and we'll lean on our defense.
Chino Mandahano on Facebook says what he thinks the key to the Gators turnaround is going to be is the fact they got a stack of running backs. That's his word, and obviously, as you said, they are going to maybe lean more on Jordan Scarlett and Pirine, some of those guys, instead of the quarterback right now, which brings me back to Tennessee. I mean, for me, it's a little bit easier to think about Tennessee being dramatically better than expectations than it is for Florida, because the one thing that Tennessee has going for it, it's bringing in an outsider. It's bringing in Keller Chris, the Stanford transfer. Maybe he doesn't light the world on fire, but much like Malik Zaire arriving at Florida, he does bring a fresh dose of hope with him. Now, at Florida, for Zaire, it turned out not to be worth all that much. But if you're Tennessee, you can at least point to something. We're about to get a guy here that nobody's seen yet. I mean, for the most part, we've seen what Florida's got.
But to me, that goes along the lines of the same things I'm talking about people are getting wrong about Florida. When I look at Florida, I see a strong defense and an offensive line that the ceiling is through the roof. And so I don't see that at Tennessee. I think that Brandon Kennedy might step into a starting role when he shows up. And I think that tells you what you need to know about Tennessee's offensive line, that there's not many playmakers up front. I mean, Trey Smith is really the only returning starter that you feel good about on that offensive line. The defensive line, there isn't any Jabari Zunigas or CeCe Jeffersons over there. There's not any David Reese at linebacker, although I think they have a decent linebacking core. Building from the trenches out is what I like to see teams do. Obviously, you guys know me. Florida's got that right now. Tennessee doesn't, in my opinion.
Tony Elam, who's a Tennessee fan on Facebook, says that BA's negative Nancy. I just said something good about Tennessee. See, even when I'm trying to be nice, no one's nice back to me. Like, there's no motivation for me. Honestly, there's zero motivation for me to be nice. Because even when I am nice, people still come back.
Listen,
and just
man,
hammer
it's
me.
a slow build. It's got to be a string of compliments.
You better be glad I have thick skin.
It's got to be a stream of compliments. We're building up to it.
All right, let me do item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We talked about the Phil Steele preseason All-SEC first team, which can be found in the Phil Steele College Football Preview on newsstands everywhere. And this is not an official list. I find the need to say that once again. But, when these various tastemakers sort of spout off about this kind of stuff, it gives us fodder for conversation. I couldn't help but notice as I'm flipping through the magazine here, according to Phil Steele, Mississippi State's got 2 first-team All-SEC defensive linemen, Montez Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons. Let me tell you something, and y'all already all know this. You can do something with that.
No, listen.
You can do something with that.
Yes. And you're going to have to. And listen, and it's not just the defense line. I mean, there's playmakers for Mississippi State. These are guys that know what they're doing, that have been in this system. I mean, and obviously things are going to be different under Joe Moorhead. That's why
Jeffrey Simmons packs a powerful punch.
Listen, Montez Sweat was elite last year. I mean, there's no reason either one of these guys shouldn't be, first-string All-SEC defensive lineman when you look at it. They are elite players, and that's what concerns me for Mississippi State when we start looking at the season is, what if Joe Moorhead doesn't get it done? I mean, what a missed opportunity. When you look at, it's been a long time since Mississippi State's had elite players like they have this year on defense. It's been a long time, and I get nervous for Mississippi State fans that Joe Moorhead's not the guy and that he possibly drops the ball there in year one, still adjusting to being a head coach.
Michael Clyburn says, take notice, B.A. Michael's a big Mississippi State fan. He says, take notice, B.A., you've been sleeping the whole time. On these particular names, I've not been sleeping, nor have I been sleeping on Leo Lewis. I mean, I've always said that Mississippi State's got those individual pieces on defense. These are, 4- and 5-star prospects that really everybody wanted. I don't know that it's enough to have the kind of season that Bulldogs fans want to have. But the one thing I will say is, they are going to be a load to play. I mean, even if, look, the honest truth is I think Mississippi State wins fewer games than the folks in Starkville want to win.
Yeah.
But that does not mean beating them is going to be easy. And when you got Sweat and Simmons up front like that as the tip of the spear of the defense, it's going to be hard to beat them.
And your offensive line better bring their hat. I mean, that's what it really boils down to. You cannot let yourself, against this Mississippi State team in 2018, get into 3rd and long. You have to stay on schedule on downs. I think Florida, they have the right combination of offensive line, but I'm just telling you right now, if Felipe Franks or Kyle Trask finds himself in 3rd and long against this Mississippi State defensive line in Starkville with the Cowbells, it's going to be a long day for either one of them. They've got to stay on schedule.
Chad Masker reminds us of this. You may not remember Chauncey Rivers was at Georgia a few years ago, redshirt of Mississippi State last year. He's going to be eligible this season. That's another big name to think about. Jared Seeger's bringing up Jeffrey Simmons' unfortunate pass. I think that's probably behind him Now at this point, I think people are doing that because of something that I said. I was taking a bit of a veiled shot there, but it's all in good fun, I guess. But the point is, Mississippi State's defense is going to be good.
No, I just got your shot a minute ago. It completely flew by me, but yeah, absolutely. No, and that's what I'm kind of circling around is. If you don't have the offensive line to play Mississippi State this year, this is the chance that Mississippi State has to really make you look bad with a home field advantage. For that crowd is raucous. Going to Starkville was tough last year. Going to Starkville this year could be even worse, honestly.
Yeah, there's no question about that. No doubt about that whatsoever. All right, let's do item number 8, SEC Country Live, first and 10 list. So one thing about us is, and maybe you're not as into this as I am, I love this time of year when these SEC dignitaries, most of them are head coaches, when they go throwing out first pitches at baseball game. I think you can learn a lot from a guy by how he throws out a first pitch, ceremonial first pitch at these baseball games. I want you to see Kentucky coach Mark Stoops. Now, a local TV station captures the video here of Stoops. Watch this. He goes, well, just see it for yourself. He goes to the mound and he throws a strike. Take a look. Here comes Stoops. He's got the minor league jersey on. Got the 18 in the back for the number. Doesn't even think about throwing in front of the mound. Off the mound there and throws a strike. And this ain't like that Jalen Hurts pitch of the day where they shot that thing from like an angle of 20,000 miles in space, not to see it bounce 4 times. I saw the delivery. I saw where the catcher catches it. Mark Stoops throws a strike. You think I'm kidding here? I just gained a ton of respect for Stoops on this. I don't know if he's got baseball in his background or what, but this is a confident man that strides to the plate here. This is a leader of men right here.
All I can think about when we talk about Mark Stoops, just like outside of football like this, was it Toby Keith that did like the radio interview with him last year on like the big.
That's right.
Like that was like I've not been able to get over that moment. And there's a lot of stuff I should be able to get over, but I have a lot of respect for Mark Stoops outside of the first pitch. But I got to give him credit. I mean, I'm definitely jealous.
There are 13 other coaches in the SEC. I want to ask you to give me individual names. How many do you think can match the first pitch that Stoops just threw?
Oh, God, I have no idea.
I bet there aren't 4.
I don't think there's that many.
I bet there's not. There may be fewer than that.
Yeah, I don't think there's that many.
What he just did is actually a little bit more difficult than he made it look. Throwing the ball. I mean, listen.
I just have respect that he didn't like try to underhand it or stand in front of the mound. Yeah, he went to the rubber.
Yeah, it's like these guys that like old timers day, like stand right there on the grass. I mean, if you walk like to the grass and you're like 20 feet in front of the mound, that's not a good job.
No, I've told you this before. I tried to do that down at a AA game in Pensacola. I didn't throw a strike. I'll tell you.
I'll tell you right now. I mean, listen. I'm pitching my son in the yard every single day. Throwing strikes is not easy.
Yeah, Bo Molinari says he thinks Derek Mason can do it.
I think Derek Mason thinks he can do it. Yeah, Derek Mason also lied about being a DJ.
Yeah.
Derek Mason was no DJ.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, let's do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So I thought this was interesting. CBS Sports did this deal the other day where they talked about coaches on the rise. The writer's Tom Fornelli. He does something like this every single year where you kind of look at these coaches. And some of them are current head coaches, maybe on the rise for new jobs. And some of them are assistants who may be rising onto a head coaching job potentially. And the only name from the SEC that was on the list, and it wasn't like not that it even matters, but it wasn't officially on the list, it was an honorable mention, was Mike Elko, the defensive coordinator now at A&M, who came over from Notre Dame, who is just a top-flight defensive coordinator. Yeah. But I guess, and we're going to kind of do this off the top of our head here, so this may be a total disaster. First of all, on Elko, I mean, do you think, based on what you think you know about him, is this the kind of thing where, and this is just, I mean, it's just terrible if you're an A&M fan. You fall in love with this guy for 1 year, then he's coaching at like Alcorn State the next year as the head coach. I mean, are we a risk for A&M of seeing him be one and done there in College Station?
I think if they want to have him stay around for 2 years, they're going to have to pony up. I mean, is he making 1.9? He's making like almost
he's
2
making a lot of money.
He's making a lot of money. And he's not making Dave Aranda money because Texas A&M is the one that forced LSU to pay Dave Aranda all that money. But I do think there's a good chance after this season they're going to have to pony up an extra $300,000 or $400,000 if they do want to keep him in College Station. I love the hire. I love the fact they got him out of Notre Dame. I love that Jimbo Fisher self-scouted A&M enough to go, listen, we need a top-flight defensive coordinator. They've tried to do that under Kevin Sumlin. It would stink for A&M if he leaves after 1 year and becomes a head coach, but I think you'd be thankful you had him for a year.
I'm totally putting you on the spot about this, but if it makes you feel better, I haven't thought about this for 5 seconds either. Who is the assistant coach in the SEC most likely to become a head coach in 2019.
I gotta think it's Dave Aranda. I mean,
yeah,
you know why?
It's hard to top Aranda.
Because I think that with the structure and the way things are at LSU, and LSU fans aren't going to like this. I'm just telling you, I think he's the head coach at LSU.
You can't do that.
I know,
man.
I know, but the structure, the way Joe Oliva sits in his chair, he knows that if he fires Orgeron, he's fired. The only thing that could save him is saying, we're going to promote Dave Aranda.
It's not like they're even recruiting that well. I mean, like Aranda's a super sharp DC, but I mean, it almost never happens. And
he just screams head coach.
And Orgeron's not a failed coach yet, but it never happens that a failed coach gets replaced by one of his assistants.
I mean, we can talk about Mel Tucker.
The Georgia assistant most likely to become a head coach, I believe, is James Coley. I think that Coley becomes a head coach before anybody else.
And that's possible. I look at Mel Tucker, and he was, he's been getting sniffs before. I mean, he was a head coach for the Jacks.
I think he wants to be, and he may get
head coach
one.
for the Jacks.
Is it too easy to say Dan Enos, the quarterback coach at Alabama? After all, he was a head coach before going to Arkansas.
You can look that direction. I would throw Tyson Helton into that mix at some point if he has a good year at Tennessee. I wouldn't sleep on him either.
Interesting name. All right, let's go item number 10 here, and this is a little bit different for us in the fact that there is no joke here. This is actually, to me, really serious, but not in a bad way, like in a lighthearted way. You may have seen this video. This is a Mississippi State fan who visits his dad, who has the, I guess, early onset dementia starting to set in here, a little bit of an Alzheimer's deal. And Hannah knows this better than I do. The dad's got a history with Mississippi State, right? So the son here is going to surprise the dad with tickets to go to the see the College World Series at in Omaha. This is a beautiful, touching video. I loved every minute of this. We don't normally play a 90-second video, but you got to see this because you don't have to be a Mississippi State fan to certainly appreciate the bond that a father can have with the son, especially a couple days before Father's Day, and the love that they share for the SEC here. This is really good stuff. Take a look at this.
Knock, knock.
Oh my gosh!
How are you?
What in the world?
Happy Father's Day.
Well, thank you. This is a great surprise.
Yep. Well, I thought since it's Father's Day, Mississippi State made the World Series. I thought I'd come up here and we'll watch it together.
Yeah.
So, but I kind of brought you another shirt. So you need to take this off right now.
Glad to do it.
Let me get his hat. Can I get his cap?
I just turn the shirt around. So it's a Mississippi State shirt for you to wear when we watch the game. You don't have to put it on right now.
Well, I wore this uniform.
Yep.
In state.
Mm-hmm.
Here you go. Just hold it up. He wants you to hold it up.
Well, I'm got goosebumps. Okay. I'm just about to pee in my pants.
Okay.
But
I know.
Okay.
I figured it's probably not good enough just for us to watch the game here.
Yeah.
How about we go to Omaha?
Really?
Do you want to go up to Omaha and let's go watch the College World Series together?
Golly.
Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Just me and you to take a road trip?
Shoot. Hallelujah. You're going to break my heart here.
So anyway,
well, happy Father's Day. So
I just think that's one of the most touching videos. And for me, listen, it reminds me of every house I ever lived in, the house my grandparents lived in. And my grandfather was a big part of introducing me to the SEC. And, this guy reminds me a lot of my grandfather there near the end of his life. This is just an incredibly touching video. I tell you, it gets me emotional thinking about, the way the SEC brings his father and son together there.
No, and it's every father-son relationship. I mean, you hope that, your dad doesn't end up with Alzheimer's or, some of the things, but how old school is it to be able to go watch an SEC team in the College World Series with your dad? I mean, that's everything good about the world.
Yeah, honestly. I mean, listen, like I didn't graduate from Georgia. I'm not an SEC graduate. I mean, my entrance into this SEC conversation we have every day is because of the fact that my dad was a big fan. His dad took me to the games when I was like 3 or 4 years old. So my relationship with this stuff is really reminded to me by that video there. So I just thought that was incredible. And I wanted to share that here to close out the week. And by the way, call your dad this week for Father's Day. Let that be a reminder to do just that. All right. We'll get ready to close the show the way we always do, looking for a champion of life. And today, this one's a little bit different than some of the stuff we played in the past. I find this to be fascinating. I had no idea Lions could do this here. You've got a few professional wrestlers from the outfit known as NXT. It's sort of like the minor leagues of the WWE. There's like 3 of them pulling as hard as they can. Watch this one lion here, though. Are you kidding me?
Oh, my God.
Did you know a lion could do that?
Not even budging. I've never seen this video.
This is, I think it's relatively new. I think it just
San
came out
Antonio
today.
Zoo.
I mean, they're pulling and pulling and
Where
pulling.
do they come up with things like this, man?
And that lion, I mean, Hannah, one of our producers, asked a great question. What's the motivation for the lion to even do this? I don't quite know, like, what's in it for him, or in this case, I guess it's a her.
It's just a chew toy for him.
Yeah, what's in it for her? But nonetheless, that lion is stronger than all three of those pro wrestlers. That is a fascinating thing. All right, we will be gone for the weekend here, but we'll see you back on Monday. In between now and then, if you missed a portion of our broadcast, you can check out the podcast. It'll be up for you here right away. Do us a favor, share the show with your friends. Let them know that we are talking about the SEC here every afternoon. Hope to be doing that for a long time to come. But let folks know where they can find us. And then we'll see you again Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great weekend. Talk to you then.